After my heart surgery, I send a message in our family chat. "Who's picking me up from the hospital?" My son replied. "Call a cab. I'm watching TV." My wife added. "Stay there another month. It's so peaceful without you." That evening, when I appeared on the news, their 67 calls went straight to voicemail. What I did changed everything. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and comment below with the current time where you are. Pain struck like a lightning bolt, splitting my chest in two. I gasped, eyes snapping open to harsh, blinding white light that made my skull throb. Where was I? The room spun in sickening circles. White walls, beeping machines, tubes trailing from my arms like plastic snakes. I tried to sit up. My body screamed. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. My chest felt as if someone had pried it open with a crowbar. Through the thin hospital gown, I could feel the heavy bandages wrapped tightly around me. "Mr. Thompson, you're awake?" A woman in a white coat appeared beside my bed. Kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm Dr. Carter, your cardiologist. How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," I croaked, my throat raw and sore. "What happened to me?" She glanced at the monitor next to my bed. The numbers meant nothing to me, but her calm, professional expression was steady. "You had emergency cardiac surgery 2 days ago. A triple bypass. Your heart stopped for 47 seconds during the operation." 47 seconds. The words fell like stones into a deep well inside my mind. Dead? I had been dead. Technically. But they had brought me back. She pressed her fingers against my wrist, counting my pulse. "You're going to be fine, Mr. Thompson. The surgery was successful. 2 weeks in the hospital, then a gradual return to normal life." 2 weeks. I scanned the sterile room. A small window framed the gray Dallas skyline under cloudy January skies. No flowers. No cards. No sign anyone knew I was here. A nurse bustled in, adjusting the 4 in my left arm. Warm smile, gentle hands. "I'm Jennifer. I'll be your nurse this shift. Are you in pain?" I nodded, voice unreliable. She made a note and adjusted the 4. Within minutes, the sharp edges of pain softened. Dr. Carter pulled a chair next to my bed. "Mr. Thompson, I need to ask a few questions to check your cognitive function. What year is it?" 2025. "And the month?" "January," I said, the word heavy on my tongue. "Good. Now squeeze my hands as hard as you can." Weak as a newborn's grip, but she nodded approvingly. "Motor functions are good. Memory intact. Over the next few days, we'll focus on pain management and gentle movement. You'll be walking short distances soon." After she left, I was alone with the machines and their endless beeping. My hand reached for the bedside table. My phone. Dozens of notifications, news alerts, spam, pharmacy reminders. I scrolled for something else. Family messages. Missed calls. Nothing. I opened the family chat. Last message 3 weeks ago, Susan complaining the store was out of her favorite yogurt. Before that, Scott asking to borrow money for car repairs. Not a word about my surgery. Not a single call asking how I was. I set the phone down, trembling, staring at the ceiling tiles. 47 seconds dead, and apparently, no one noticed. I closed my eyes. The antiseptic smell pulled memories I had tried to bury. Summer 2020. Arlington backyard. Planting tomatoes in the heat. Chest tightness like a band squeezing my ribs. I gripped the fence post, telling myself it was the Texas heat. "Buford, you're being dramatic again," Susan called from the porch, iced tea in hand. "Come inside before you have a stroke." I laughed it off. 66 years old, still strong. Just needed water rest. But the episodes kept coming. By 2021, climbing stairs felt like scaling a mountain. I'd pause halfway, hand on the banister, heart hammering like it wanted out. Susan was already in bed, watching TV. "You're getting old," she said without looking up. Maybe ease up on the weekend projects. I never mentioned the metallic taste in my mouth, the way the world tilted when I stood too fast. She had enough worries with her book club and charity meetings. Scott was even less help. Maybe see a doctor, Dad. Actually, wait. That's expensive. Try some vitamins first. 28 years old, still living in our basement, worried more about my medical bills cutting into his inheritance than about me. The first serious attack came on a Tuesday morning in March 2023, right in our kitchen. I was making coffee when the pain slammed into my chest like a sledgehammer. I grabbed the counter for support, spilling coffee grounds across the linoleum as I slid down to the cold floor. Susan? I tried to call, but my voice barely made it past the doorway. 10 minutes later, she found me, gasping, still on the floor. "Oh, Buford, did you fall?" she said, helping me to a chair, but already glancing at her schedule. "I've got a hair appointment in an hour. Can you drive yourself to the doctor?" I drove myself to the emergency room instead. The young doctor examining me had calm eyes and steady hands. "Mr. Thompson, you've had a minor heart attack. We need to run more tests." The results confirmed my worst fears. Years of chest pain weren't just stress or aging. My arteries were clogged, rusted shut. Without surgery, 6 months, maybe less, Dr. Martinez told me in November. With a triple bypass, you could have 10 good years. I drove home in my old Chevy, hands trembling on the wheel. 10 good years. But with whom? With people who barely noticed I was dying? The creak of my hospital room door brought me back. Nurse Jennifer peeked in with her warm smile. "How are you feeling, Mr. Thompson? Need anything for pain?" I looked at my phone, still nothing from my family. She nodded knowingly. "Surgery gives people time to think. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes not so much." After she left, I stared at the family chat icon. 2 weeks since surgery. 2 weeks of silence. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe the hospital didn't tell them. Maybe 45 years of marriage and raising a son still meant something. Maybe. January 29th arrived bright and crisp through the hospital window. Freedom Day. I packed my few belongings into the old sports bag Susan had brought me years ago for fishing trips. Carefully folded, reading glasses, a paperback barely touched, pajamas that still smelled like home. My chest felt stronger. The stitches tugged when I moved, but the crushing pain was now just a dull ache. Dr. Carter signed my discharge papers with a smile. "You're lucky to be alive, Mr. Thompson. Make the most of this second chance." I checked my phone again. Still nothing from Susan or Scott. 2 weeks of silence while I clawed my way back from death. Maybe they thought I was too fragile. Maybe they were planning a welcome home surprise. I typed a message. "Hi everyone, I'm being discharged today and feeling much better. Can't wait to see you all." Deleted. Too long, too emotional. Hospital is releasing me today. Looking forward to coming home. Deleted. Still too much. Third attempt, the doctor says I can come home today. Would love to see everyone. Hopeful, but not desperate. I pressed send. The reply came faster than I expected. "Scott first, call a taxi. I'm watching TV. 47 seconds dead. 2 weeks in intensive care. And my son couldn't pause his show. Susan? Surely she'd understand. 45 years of marriage. She'd bring me home herself. Stay another month in hospital. It's so good without you." The phone slipped from my hands onto the blanket. Words glowed like a neon sign, announcing the end of everything I believed about family. Stay another month. It's so good without you. I sank onto the edge of the bed. The morning sunlight mocked me. My chest ached, but not from surgery. This pain ran deeper, beyond any scalpel's reach. Nurse Jennifer appeared at the door, clipboard in hand. She stepped inside, closing it behind her. "Mr. Thompson, you look pale. Chest pain?" I shook my head. She picked up my phone and glanced at the screen. Her professional mask softened into something quieter, sadder. I'm sorry. Family can be complicated. Complicated. That was one way to put it. Another way, 45 years spent giving everything to people who treated me like nothing. People who enjoyed my absence more than my presence. I looked at the discharge papers on the bed, medication schedules, follow-up appointments, warnings about lifting, guides for a new life. But as I sat there reading Susan's words, they transformed. Not just instructions. Freedom. Evidence of 45 years of being a fool. I walked out of Memorial Hospital on unsteady legs, every step reminding me I'd almost died and nobody cared. The taxi driver, a weathered man with kind eyes, greeted me. Tough day at the hospital, amigo. Tough 45 years, I said before I could stop myself. He glanced at me in the mirror as we merged into Dallas traffic. Surgery? He asked. I nodded, sinking back against the vinyl seat. Discharge papers crinkled in my lap. And suddenly, I remembered another moment, shaking hands, important papers. 1982. Scott was a baby. I was 25, dreams bigger than our small apartment. 2 years saved to buy that motorcycle. A gleaming Harley-Davidson that made me feel alive every time I twisted the throttle. But babies need cribs, not motorcycles. The bike has to go, Susan had said, bouncing Scott on her hip. We need the money for baby furniture. I polished that chrome one last time before hanging the for sale sign. $3,000 for freedom traded for responsibility. I told myself it was temporary, just until Scott got older. The taxi passed a motorcycle dealership. Rows of bikes glinting in the afternoon sun. My chest ached with more than surgical scars. Family's tough sometimes, the driver said, steering toward the highway. Mine too, I muttered. A memory surfaced, 1995. Susan and I planning a honeymoon 15 years overdue. Paris in the spring. I'd been saving for months, working overtime at the factory. Then Scott got accepted to college. Europe will always be there, Susan had said, tears streaking her face as she tore up the travel brochures. Scott's education is more important. 4 years of college expenses. The Paris dream went into a box with all my other postponed happiness. We passed downtown now, glass towers reflecting the gray January sky. I remembered the same streets in 2003, exhausted from double shifts, while Susan stayed home watching soap operas. When do I get to rest? I had asked, collapsing into the recliner after 16 hours at the plant. When Scott graduates and gets a good job. She promised. Then we'll have time for us. Scott graduated. Then he needed help with rent. Then a car loan. Then seed money for a graphic design business that folded within 6 months. The memory of that loan hit hardest. 2010. I'd signed papers putting our house up as collateral while Scott sketched grand plans on napkins. This is our ticket, Dad. 6 months, and I'll pay back everything with interest. The business lasted 4 months. I worked 3 more years to pay off the debt. The taxi turned onto familiar streets in Arlington. Past the elementary school where I'd coached Scott's little league team while sacrificing my own dreams. Past the park where I pushed Susan on swings when we were courting, back when she looked at me like a hero instead of an ATM. You got someone picking you up? The driver asked as we neared my neighborhood. I thought about the messages still burning in my phone. Call a taxi. Stay another month. It's so good without you. No, I said quietly. I think I'm done being picked up. The house appeared around the corner. White siding, green shutters, the lawn I'd mowed every Saturday for 20 years. It should have felt like home. Instead, it looked like a monument to my own mistakes. I paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk, staring at 45 years of mortgage payments and maintenance work, all so Susan could have her book clubs and Scott could have his gaming setup. The driver pulled away, leaving me alone with my thoughts in a house that suddenly felt like proof of the biggest mistake of my life. I walked toward the front door, keys heavy in my fingers. The house felt different now, not like home, but like evidence. The key turned with a soft click, and I stepped into darkness. Even the entryway felt foreign, like stepping into someone else's life. I flipped the light switch and surveyed what my family had done with their freedom. Mail piled on the table by the door. Unopened bills and advertisements scattered carelessly. Susan's shoes where she'd kicked them off, Scott's muddy sneakers nearby. Weeks of neglect were obvious. The living room was worse. Scott's gaming setup sprawled across the space. Energy drink cans formed a pyramid on the coffee table. Pizza boxes stacked beside my recliner, the chair I'd bought with overtime money 15 years ago. They'd been having parties. I moved slowly through the remnants of their comfort. My absence hadn't caused worry or grief. It had caused celebration. The kitchen told the same story, dishes piled in the sink, takeout containers overflowing the trash. Expensive wine and premium ice cream in the fridge, luxuries they indulged in while I fought for my life. But my study was the final insult. Turned into storage. Boxes of Susan's craft supplies covered my desk. Scott's old computer gear stacked on the shelves. Dust settled over the family photos I'd arranged with care. 47 seconds. I'd been dead for 47 seconds, and they'd used my personal space as a closet. I sank into the one chair they hadn't covered. The combination to my safe still burned in my memory, Scott's birthday. How fitting. The safe opened with a soft mechanical whisper. Inside, my will rested in its blue legal folder, just as I'd left it months ago. I pulled it out with steady hands, reading every provision I had crafted so carefully. To my beloved wife, Susan Thompson, I leave the house and all personal belongings. To my son, Scott Thompson, I bequeath all financial assets, including retirement accounts, to be divided equally upon my passing. Beloved wife. I laughed bitterly, the sound bouncing off the walls of my desecrated study. The woman who told me to stay in the hospital an extra month because it was so good without me. My son, a 38-year-old man who couldn't pause his TV show to check on his dying father. I walked to the family photos on the dusty shelves. Wedding pictures of a young couple brimming with hope. Scott's baby photos, tiny hands reaching for the camera, innocent smiles. Vacation snapshots from trips I'd funded but barely enjoyed, always worrying about the cost. In every frame, I was smiling, the provider, the protector, the fool. I unlocked my phone and typed estate attorneys Dallas. Names and numbers filled the screen, professionals who understood that wills could be rewritten, that inheritance was a privilege, not a right. Jonathan Hale and Associates topped the list, specialists in estate planning and charitable giving. Perfect. I glanced around my study one last time, boxes covering my desk, dust on personal belongings, the evidence of my family's disregard. Then I looked at the will in my lap. Tomorrow I would call Mr. Hale. Tomorrow I would correct the largest mistake of my life. Tonight, I would plan exactly how to give my family what they truly deserved, nothing. The elevator climbed, floor by floor, each number bringing me closer to justice. 15 stories up in a downtown Dallas high-rise, Jonathan Hale waited with the power to reshape my family's future. A week had passed since my homecoming revelation. 7 days of research, planning, and gathering documentation. I'd found the American Heart Disease Foundation online, a charity that supported families during cardiac emergencies, people who truly valued life. The elevator doors opened onto a hallway of mahogany and brass. Hale and Associates gleamed in gold letters on frosted glass. Mr. Thompson, the receptionist greeted warmly. Mr. Hale is ready for you. Jonathan Hale's office overlooked downtown Dallas through floor-to-ceiling windows. Law books lined the walls between framed degrees from universities I'd never dreamed of attending. He was younger than I expected, maybe 55, with silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. Please have a seat, he said, gesturing to a leather chair across from his enormous desk. I understand you want to make significant changes to your estate plan. I settled into the chair, documents balanced on my knees. I want to leave everything to charity. Nothing to my family. His eyebrows lifted slightly. That's a major change. May I ask what prompted this decision? I told him everything: the surgery, the 47 seconds I'd spent clinically dead, 2 weeks in the hospital without a single call, coming home to find they'd been living it up while I fought for my life. Hale listened silently, taking careful notes. Mr. Thompson, I must ask, are you making this decision out of anger? People often act rashly after a medical crisis. I'd had a week to think. I opened my folder, pulling out emails, bank statements, medical records. This isn't anger. It's clarity. He reviewed the documents. You're meticulous. The American Heart Disease Foundation is an excellent choice. They provide housing for cardiac patients' families, fund research, support recovery programs. People who understand the value of life. Exactly, I said. Unlike my family. We could structure this as a charitable remainder trust, he suggested. You'd retain lifetime residence of your home, a small monthly stipend, and upon your death, everything transfers to the foundation. Perfect. Comfort for me, justice for them. What about your wife and son? Even a token bequest might. The word escaped harder than I intended. They're adults. Time they learn to fend for themselves. Hale studied me, then nodded. Very well. Drafting this will take about an hour. Are you certain about this course of action? I thought of Scott's text, call a taxi. I'm watching TV. Susan's words, stay another month. It's so good without you. I had never been more certain of anything. The next hour passed in a blur of legal language and document preparation. Hale's secretary brought in 2 paralegals as witnesses. This revokes all prior wills, Hale explained as he laid out the documents. Upon your death, your home and all assets transferred to the American Heart Disease Foundation. Lifetime residence rights and a modest stipend remain for you. I read every word twice. No mention of Susan, no provision for Scott. Clean, legal language that would transform their comfortable assumptions into stark reality. The signing was surprisingly simple, 3 signatures, 2 witnesses, 1 notary stamp. 45 years of supporting an ungrateful family erased in black ink on white paper. I'll contact the foundation this week, Hale said, handing me certified copies. They'll want to meet, discuss media announcement possibilities. Media announcement? I liked the sound of that. Public recognition for charity. Public humiliation for my family. The foundation's offices are in this building, Hale continued. 12th floor. Their media coordinator, Rebecca Mills, is exceptional at handling stories like yours. I stood, sliding the certified copies securely into my jacket pocket. At the door, Hale shook my hand with genuine respect. You're making a remarkable contribution, Mr. Thompson. The foundation helps hundreds of families every year, families who truly deserve it. Unlike mine, I replied. The hallway seemed brighter as I walked back to the elevator. Behind me, Hale's office contained the machinery of justice. Ahead, the Foundation's offices held the power to turn private satisfaction into public vindication. 3 floors down, they buzzed with the energy of purpose. Time to transform private justice into a public message. The elevator opened to a sunlit reception area, walls adorned with heart health posters and photographs of grateful families. Mr. Thompson? Rebecca Mills appeared from a corner office, a professional efficiency paired with a warm smile. I'm Rebecca Mills, media coordinator. Thank you for choosing our foundation. Her office displayed awards and framed newspaper clippings from successful campaigns. She understood the power of a compelling story. Please sit. She gestured to a plush chair across from her desk. Your attorney mentioned you want to make your donation public. Tell me your story. I recounted everything. The surgery, the 47 seconds I was clinically dead, 2 weeks in the hospital with no calls, the cruel text messages I'd received upon returning home. Rebecca listened intently, pen moving across her yellow pad. This is incredible, she said. Your story could save lives. People need to understand the critical role of family support during medical crises. If my pain helps someone else, it's worth it, I said. She picked up the phone and dialed. Channel 8, This is Rebecca Mills at the Heart Foundation. I have a story for you, a local man donating his entire estate after being abandoned by his family during heart surgery. The conversation lasted 10 minutes. Her eyes sparkled with anticipation. They can send a crew to your home this afternoon. Perfect timing. Heart Disease Awareness Week starts Monday. The morning passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Rebecca coached me on key points: family support, the Foundation's mission, the reality of cardiac recovery. But above all, she urged honesty about my family's betrayal. Don't hold back, she said. Authentic emotion resonates. Your story will touch hearts and save lives. By noon, we were at Channel 8's downtown studio. Jennifer, the news producer, understood immediately the weight of the story: a man giving away his house after being abandoned by his family during heart surgery. This will resonate with viewers, she said. The interview went smoothly. Bright lights, professional cameras, questions I had rehearsed with Rebecca. David Martinez, the interviewer, balanced sympathy with journalistic precision. Mr. Thompson, what went through your mind when you received those texts? I realized love should be mutual, I replied calmly. Gratitude is a choice, not an obligation. For 45 years, I put my family first. When I needed them most, they chose differently. Why heart disease research? He asked. They saved my life when my heart stopped for 47 seconds. My family didn't seem to care whether I lived or died. After the studio, the crew followed me home to Arlington. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains as the Channel 8 van parked in my driveway. Cameras captured the house soon to belong to the Foundation. Inside, David asked more personal questions while filming. We sat in my living room, the same room where Scott had expanded his gaming setup during my hospitalization. This is where you recovered, he said, and discovered they'd been living comfortably without me, partying, ordering expensive food, turning my study into storage. I said. The camera swept across family photos on the mantel, wedding pictures, Scott's graduation, vacation snapshots, all funded by my sacrifices, all witnesses to my devotion. Any regrets? David asked. I looked directly into the lens. My only regret is that it took me 68 years to recognize my own worth. By late afternoon, filming was complete. David shook my hand with genuine respect. This will air at 6 o'clock. Expect it to get picked up by other stations, too. I spent the evening at a quiet downtown restaurant, my phone buzzing occasionally with messages from Rebecca about social media strategy. The Foundation's online team was ready to amplify the story. At exactly 6 o'clock, I watched myself on the restaurant TV. The anchor introduced the segment with perfect timing. A Dallas man donates his house to charity, but the reason behind it has everyone talking. My face filled the screen, calm, dignified, telling the truth about family betrayal and medical abandonment. Footage showed my house, my explanation of the donation, and Rebecca emphasizing the importance of supporting cardiac patients. The restaurant was silent, though other diners glanced at the screen, then at me, some sympathetic, others shocked on my behalf. My phone stayed quiet. Rebecca had advised letting the story spread organically. By tomorrow, she predicted, it would be everywhere. Driving home, I wondered if my family had seen it yet. They watched the local news every evening, usually grumbling about the weather or bickering over politics. Tonight, however, the screen would reflect their own cruelty to thousands of strangers. Tonight, they would realize that their easy, comfortable life was over. The garage door lifted to reveal the same house I had left that morning. But everything had changed. By tomorrow, Scott and Susan would grasp that their 45 years of taking me for granted had finally caught up with them. I turned off the television and went to bed, sinking into the first truly peaceful sleep I'd had since my surgery. In the Thompson living room, the evening news served as mere background noise. Susan flipped through her magazines while Scott's eyes darted between his video game and the TV. Pizza boxes and empty soda cans littered the coffee table, evidence of how comfortably they'd settled into life without me. Another dull day, Scott muttered, hammering buttons on his controller. Nothing ever happens in this dumb town. Susan looked up, smirking. At least we don't have to deal with your father's endless worrying. Remember how he used to fuss over every little expense? They laughed, oblivious that their world was about to shatter. The anchor's tone shifted. A Dallas man is making headlines tonight after donating his house to charity, but it's the reason behind his generosity that has everyone talking. Scott's controller slipped from his hands. The house on the screen, it was theirs. Same white siding, same green shutters, same oak tree. Mom, Scott whispered. That's our house. Susan's magazine toppled to the floor. They stared in mounting horror as the camera slowly panned across their property. This can't be happening. This has to be a mistake, Scott muttered. Then Buford's face filled the screen. Oh my God! Susan gasped. That's your father. They sat frozen, listening as I recounted my story: heart surgery, clinical death for 47 seconds, abandonment in the hospital. When I asked my family to pick me up, I explained calmly, my son told me to call a taxi because he was busy watching TV. My wife said I should stay another month. It was so much better without me. Scott's face went pale. Those were his exact words. Susan covered her mouth with both hands, recognizing her own cruel messages now broadcast across Dallas. This is impossible, she screamed at the TV. He can't do this. That's our house. The segment continued, me explaining my decision to donate everything to the Heart Disease Foundation. No mention of inheritance. No provision for Susan or Scott. Call him. Susan grabbed Scott's arm, shaking him. Call him right now. Scott scrambled for his phone, hands shaking as he dialed. The call went straight to voicemail. Dad, it's Scott. We just saw the news. What are you doing? Call us back immediately. Susan snatched the phone, trying again. Voicemail. Buford Thompson, this is your wife. Call me back this instant. This is insane. They called again and again. After the 10th attempt, the phone went straight to voicemail every time. Meanwhile, social media erupted. Scott's Facebook feed overflowed with shares of the story. Friends, neighbors, and acquaintances recognized the house, expressing outrage at their behavior. Look at this. Scott showed his mother. Everyone's calling us monsters. They say we deserve this. Susan's tears streamed freely, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Where will we go? We have no money. Everything is in his name. The reality sank in. The house, the bank accounts, the retirement funds, everything belonged to me. They had lived for decades in comfort, forgetting they owned nothing. By 10 o'clock, they'd left 67 voicemails and sent dozens of desperate texts. Still no response. He's lost his mind, Scott muttered, pacing the living room. The surgery must have damaged his brain. He doesn't know what he's doing. Or maybe he knows exactly what he's doing, Susan whispered, staring at her phone. Maybe this is revenge. They spent the rest of the evening trying to comprehend the magnitude of their situation. No income, no savings, no property. Scott had never held a real job, and Susan hadn't worked in 30 years. What do we do? Scott asked his mother around midnight, voice tight with fear. How do we fix this? Susan wiped her tears and looked around the living room, at Scott's high-end gaming setup, her glossy magazines, the cozy life built on Buford's hard work. We wait for him to come home, she said, her voice grim. Then we make him understand, family is family, no matter what. They stationed themselves by the front window to watch the driveway. Susan brewed coffee to stay awake. Scott kept his phone charging, ready to call. Neither slept that night. They sat vigil, eyes fixed on the street, rehearsing arguments to salvage their lifestyle. But deep down, they both sensed something irreversible had shifted. The man they'd relied on for 45 years had finally stopped relying on them. Dawn arrived. They had been waiting, practicing every word that might preserve their comfort. Susan perched by the window, coffee trembling in her hands. Scott paced behind her, phone clutched like a weapon he didn't know how to wield. The sound of a key in the lock froze them both. This was it, their chance to repair the disaster they'd caused. Buford walked through the door at 8:30, calm and unhurried. He found them blocking the path to the kitchen, their faces desperate and determined. "Dad!" Scott stepped forward, voice sharp. "What is this madness? We're your family!" Buford shrugged off his jacket, hanging it on the hook. "Family?" His tone was casual, almost friendly. "When I was in the hospital, fighting for my life." "Did either of you call?" "We were busy." Susan's voice cracked, feigning indignation. "You know how hard it is to manage everything without you." "Hard enough," Buford replied evenly. "That you told me to stay another month because it was so much better without me." Scott's prepared defenses collapsed under his father's steady gaze. "That was a joke. We didn't mean it seriously," he stammered. 67 calls last night," Buford said, moving toward the kitchen. "Funny how suddenly there's time to call when your inheritance is at stake." They trailed him, panicked, speaking over one another. "Dad, please, listen to reason." "Buford, you're not thinking clearly." "We love you. We've always loved you." Buford filled the coffee maker with quiet, deliberate movements, ignoring their frantic pleas. When Susan grabbed his arm, he looked down at her hand with such cold detachment that she recoiled instantly. "You have 24 hours to leave this house," he said softly. The words struck like blows. Susan staggered back. Scott went pale. "Where will we go?" Susan whispered. "We have no money." "That's no longer my problem," Buford replied, his emotional detachment more terrifying than any rage could have been. This wasn't the man who had spent 45 years catering to their every need. It was someone entirely different. "You can't do this!" Scott shouted. "I'm your son! This is my home!" "Your home?" Buford turned to him, cold and direct. "When did you last pay a mortgage? A utility bill? When did you contribute anything besides dirty dishes and demands for money?" Scott opened his mouth, but no words came. The truth was undeniable. Susan tried a softer tactic, tears in her eyes. "Honey, I know we made mistakes, but 45 years of marriage has to count for something." "It did," Buford said, pouring his coffee. "It counted, until you showed me exactly how little I mattered to you." "We can change," Susan pleaded. "We'll be different. We'll appreciate you." "For how long?" Buford asked. "Until the next time you need something? Until I'm too old or sick to be useful?" He shook his head. "I'm 68. I don't have time to wait for you to become decent people." He walked to the kitchen table, sat with his coffee, and opened the morning paper as if they weren't there, screaming at him. "The foundation will take possession next month," he said without looking up. "You have until then to find somewhere else to live." Scott slammed his hand on the table. "This is our house too." "Check the deed," Buford said calmly. "Check the bank accounts. Any legal document you like. Everything is in my name because I earned it while you lived off my labor." Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating their total powerlessness. For 45 years they had assumed Buford would always be there, always providing, always forgiving. They had been wrong. Susan slumped into a chair, finally grasping the full weight of their reality. Scott froze, watching his inheritance vanish with every word. "When I return from my walk," Buford said, standing and reaching for his coat, "I expect to see packing boxes." He checked his watch. 9 o'clock exactly, then walked to the door. "Dad, wait!" Scott began. 23 hours and 58 minutes, Buford said, not turning back. The door clicked softly behind him, leaving Susan and Scott alone amid the ruins of their long-held assumptions. Outside, Buford walked down the street he had called home for 2 decades, feeling progressively lighter with each step. Behind him, through the kitchen window, he could see them frozen in stunned silence. There was an odd serenity in justice. "The packing boxes were stacked neatly by the door when I returned from my walk," They had finally taken me seriously. Through the front window, I watched Susan frantically wrapping dishes in newspaper while Scott lugged his gaming setup to the car in repeated trips. I settled into the rocking chair on the porch with my morning coffee, perfectly positioned to observe their desperate work. The morning was crisp, clear, ideal for new beginnings. "Dad, this is your last chance!" Scott shouted, struggling with a bulky monitor. "We can make things right!" "You had 45 years of chances," I replied, not looking up from the newspaper. Susan appeared in the doorway, hair messy, eyes red from tears. "Buford, I'm sorry about that message. I wasn't thinking." "That's precisely the problem, Susan. You rarely think of anyone but yourself." The packing chaos was relentless. 45 years of accumulated belongings, crammed into less than 24 hours. Susan darted back inside repeatedly for one more thing, while Scott debated the worth of each old game, measuring trunk space with increasing frustration. By noon, Mrs. Henderson from next door wandered over, drawn by the unusual activity. "Everything all right, Buford?" she asked, noting the frantically moving boxes. "Just some family adjustments," I said pleasantly. "Nothing to worry about." She nodded politely, but her curious gaze betrayed the fact that the entire neighborhood, and probably the news, knew what was happening. Throughout the afternoon, Scott's appeals grew increasingly desperate. First anger. "This is insane! You can't survive without us." Then bargaining. "What if we paid rent? Contributed to household expenses?" Finally pleading. "Dad, where are we supposed to go? Mom hasn't worked a real job in 30 years. I've lived 68 years, I said calmly. "I think I'll manage." Susan tried everything in her considerable arsenal. Tears, health scares, reminders of our marriage vows, nostalgic memories. Nothing moved me. I had seen this act too many times over the decades. By 4 o'clock, both cars were packed beyond capacity. Clothes and possessions jammed into every inch. Furniture, kitchen appliances, and boxes that wouldn't fit had to be abandoned. "We'll be back," Scott said, loading the last box. "You can't keep us away forever." "You're welcome to visit," I said. "But only if you call first and ask permission." Susan stood by the car, keys in hand, staring at the house she had called home for 20 years. For a moment, I almost felt pity. "Almost?" she whispered. "I never thought it would end like this." "Neither did I admitted. "I thought you'd finally learn to appreciate what you had." Exactly 24 hours after my ultimatum, at 6 o'clock, both cars pulled away. Susan cried, Scott fumed, but they were gone. I stayed on the porch until dusk, watching the sun sink over my quiet neighborhood. For the first time in 45 years, I was completely alone. The silence was exquisite. Inside, the house felt vast. Empty rooms echoed under my footsteps. No TV blaring, no money arguments, no demands for attention or support. I walked to my study and opened the desk drawer where I had kept travel brochures for 20 years. Colorado mountains, Arizona deserts, national parks I had always dreamed of visiting. I finally had it all to myself. February passed quietly as I adjusted to solitude, planning my first real adventure since before marriage. In March, I embarked on a solo trip to Big Bend National Park in Texas. I had never camped alone or driven anywhere purely for pleasure. The desert overwhelmed me with its stark beauty, vast skies, ancient rock formations, and silence stretching endlessly. One evening by the campfire, I met Tom, a retired teacher from Oklahoma. "First time out here?" he asked, noticing my new camping gear. "First real trip anywhere," I admitted. "I'm 68, and this is the first trip I'm taking just for pleasure." Tom laughed warmly. "Never too late to start living for yourself, son." In April, I traveled to Colorado. Uprated gear in hand, I tackled mountain roads with growing confidence. The thin air tested my recovering heart, but hikes through pine forests revitalized me. I discovered photography, buying my first camera in decades. Snow-capped peaks reflected in crystal lakes, wildflowers blooming in high meadows, sunrises painting granite cliffs, pure gold. May brought friendship. Sarah, a widow from Denver, taught me advanced photography techniques in a senior hiking group. We spent hours discussing composition and lighting on forest trails my cardiologist would have banned 6 months earlier. "You're glowing," Dr. Carter said during my checkup. "Your recovery is remarkable." "What's changed?" "Everything," I told her. "I'm finally living for myself." My foundation work intensified. Rebecca featured my travel photos and newsletters, inspiring heart patients to see life after surgery as adventure, not mere survival. "Your story has already saved dozens of families," she told me. "They're learning to value each other while they still can." My favorite moments were talking with new heart patients, terrified and alone. I shared my journey, not just medical details, but the emotional discovery of self-worth. Family support matters, I told them, but self-respect matters more. Summer brought longer trips. Arizona's deserts bloomed in unexpected colors. Utah's red rocks tested my photography. New Mexico's ancient ruins connected me to centuries of history. I was healthier at 68 than I had been at 58. Hiking, fresh air, stress-free living, and purposeful days transformed my body and spirit alike. Tom and Sarah became regular traveling companions. We met at different parks, shared campsites, and explored trails together. For the first time in my adult life, I had friends based on shared passions, not family obligation. "You seem like a completely different person," Sarah remarked one evening as we watched the sun dip behind the cliffs at our Zion campsite. "What was I like before?" I answered simply. "Tired," I said. "Very, very tired." Rebecca's team managed the social media updates, sharing my journeys with the world. Photos of an older man rediscovering joy in the outdoors. Stories of family reconciliation through honest conversation. Inspiration for other seniors to pursue dreams long postponed. Comments arrived from across the globe, heart patients sharing struggles with family, adult children seeing echoes of themselves in Scott's behavior, spouses recognizing patterns in Susan's habit of taking devotion for granted. July ended with my return to Arlington, not out of necessity, but by choice. The house, once a prison, now felt like a welcoming sanctuary. I was flipping through photos from Colorado and my favorite downtown cafe when a shadow fell across the table. Looking up, I saw a familiar figure hesitating nearby. Scott. He looked different. Cleaner. More grown up. His usual gaming clothes were gone, replaced by neat business casual attire. His posture carried a newfound sense of responsibility. "Dad," he said uncertainly. "Mind if I sit for a minute?" I gestured to the empty chair across from me, intrigued by this change. 6 months had passed since the eviction, and Scott appeared to have aged 5 years, matured in a good way. "You look well," he said, settling in. "Tanned. Healthy. Travel agrees with you." I closed my photo album but left it open on the table. "How are things, Scott?" "Different," he said, pausing, choosing his words carefully. "I found a job. Full-time, downtown, at an advertising agency, designing marketing materials." I nodded, waiting. "I rented a small apartment, too. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. I pay rent, buy groceries, do my own laundry." "That's good, son." Scott pulled out his phone, showing photos of a modest studio apartment. Clean, organized, sparse but purposeful. "And your mother?" I asked. "She's learning independence," he said quietly. "Got a job at Macy's, has her own place." His gaze dropped to his hands. "We don't see each other much, both too busy with work." I sipped my coffee, taking in this new version of my son. The entitlement was gone, replaced with something that resembled humility. "Dad, I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said suddenly. "I'm not asking to move back, or for money, or to change your will." I raised an eyebrow. "Then what are you asking for?" "A chance to show I've changed." Maybe we could have coffee sometimes, like this, if you want. I showed him a few pictures from Colorado. His amazement felt genuine as I described hiking at high altitude, camping under the stars, learning photography from new friends. I never knew you wanted to do all this, he said softly. I never got the chance to find out myself. Scott nodded, absorbing more than I expected. I've been thinking, he said, about how much of your life you gave up for us. How we just took it for granted. The foundation work keeps me busy too, I said, showing him a newsletter featuring my story, helping other families avoid our mistakes. So, we're a cautionary tale? He asked. No, I replied. A learning opportunity for everyone involved. We talked for another hour. Scott shared his work. Deadlines, difficult clients, and the satisfaction of earning his own paycheck. He asked about my travels, genuinely curious about where I'd been and where I planned to go next. I understand if you don't want a relationship, he said as we prepared to leave. If trust needs to be rebuilt slowly. I just want you to know I get it now. What we did, how wrong it was. I walked with him to the parking lot. His car was an older sedan, nothing flashy, but clean and well kept. A small testament to responsibility. Maybe we could do this again in a month or so, I said as he reached for the door. His smile was cautious but hopeful. I'd like that, I said. No promises about anything else. I paused. I'm not changing my will. I'm not looking for the old father-son dynamic. But maybe we can create something new, something healthier. I understand, he said. And Dad, I'm glad you're happy. Finally. I watched him drive away, noticing how carefully he checked his mirrors, how he signaled at every turn. Small details, but they hinted at someone who had learned to pay attention, to take responsibility. The afternoon sun warmed my shoulders as I walked to my own car. Tomorrow, a trip to the Ozark Mountains in Arkansas. Next month, perhaps Maine, chasing the fall colors with my camera. My phone buzzed, a text from Tom. Sarah found an amazing campsite in Utah for October. You in? I typed back, absolutely. Send me the details. 6 months ago, I had been a man facing death, largely ignored by the people closest to him. Today, I was alive, healthy, surrounded by friends who chose to be in my life, not out of obligation, but because they wanted to. That difference, it changed everything. I drove home through Arlington, familiar streets greeting me. Past the cafe where Scott and I had shared an honest conversation. Past Mrs. Henderson's house, where she waved from her garden. Past the Heart Foundation office, where Rebecca was planning next month's awareness campaign. Home. At last, home to a house that truly belonged to me, to a life built intentionally, choice by choice. Some stories end with grand gestures, dramatic reconciliations, or tears. This one ended with something quieter, something rarer, the satisfaction of a man who had learned to honor his own worth as much as he had once honored others. And perhaps, the hint that love can thrive in soil richer than obligation. The sun set as I pulled into my driveway, painting the sky with the same colors I had captured in Colorado. Beautiful. Serene. Completely my own. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching.